Hey guys, what's going on? It's Chamber here, and we've done the Nvidia BIOS flashing guide, the Nvidia GPU setup guide. Now it's time for the Nvidia overclocking guide. So today we will be overclocking your Nvidia GPU. This will work for any Nvidia GPU. This is a guide that just works for every Nvidia GPU. Overclocking NVIDIA GPUs is very straightforward. NVIDIA GPUs and overclocking does not void your warranty, by the way. The overclock is actually saved in the driver. If you reinstall a driver, your overclock will actually reset. You have to reapply it. If you take the card out, plug it into a different PC, you have to reapply the overclock. You have to set it up on that PC. So this will not be like, let's say your GPU dies, send it to the manufacturer. They have no way of knowing that your graphics card actually has been overclocked. Now, this will make your PC slightly hotter. You'll pull more power. Typically, you can deal with that though. Just increase your fan speed, maybe repaste. I have some videos about that on my YouTube channel. But let's just get right into the video. So to start off, the first thing you'll need is MSI Afterburner. I'll leave a link down below. Install it. I would highly recommend installing River Tuner Statistics Server as well with the install, and then just going to here, the monitoring, and enable GPU usage, core clock, GPU temperature, power, mostly those, and that's basically it. This will just kind of tell us temperatures of the actual GPU. Another one that you could enable, if I can find it, is GPU voltage. It should be in here, but if not, then it does not really matter. No, it's not in here. I don't see it. Okay. So just check GPU usage through power. Just check these. This is very important. Another app that's very important to have is GPU Z. So GPU Z just allows us to see sensors as well. So as you can see, GPU Z, there's a sensors tab. So this will show us power. It also shows perf cap reasons, so why your performance is limited. You can also see your GPU voltage and all these other power draw voltages. So if you go to advanced, first of all, NVIDIA BIOS, you'll see your maximum power limit. If you are very low on your power limit, maybe look into flashing your BIOS. I had a video on that already. This is just very important. You'll allow to pull more power. Typically, you won't pull an insane amount of powers in some games, but if you're on a lower end GPU and you're running a higher resolution display, like let's say you're on especially even something like a 3070, might actually be power limited on a 1440p monitor. But just about flashing, so I am actually on a 360 watt BIOS. My typical is 325. There's a XOC BIOS for this, but I did not want to flash that. I want to show you still being power limited. So this is the highest power limit I can flash without going to insane territories. Now, first thing on MSI Afterburner, back to this. So what we want to check is go to these settings, check unlock voltage control and unlock voltage monitoring. If you watched my NVIDIA setup guide, you already would know this. So just restart MSI Afterburner right then. What you're going to want to do is you want to max out the core voltage slider. So what this does is if I hit Control F, which will be how we will be overclocking the GPU today, it will lock at about 1.062-ish, kind of depends. But we don't want to do that, obviously. We want to go to the max, which for this card is 1.093. It's a little different for every GPU, but this will just max it out. So this will allow full voltage, a little more frequency. Next thing we want to do, we want to max out our power limit and temperature limit. If your power limit is already at 100, uncheck right here where it says where the link button is and max out the temperature limit so they're both the same. The higher the temperature limit, the less it will downclock. Next, we're going to want to do fan speed, so check A. And you want to set this to whatever you want. On this BIOS, I can run 100% because the fans are not actually insanely fast on this BIOS. So once you're done that, just save that profile. This is a very basic profile, so this will give you slightly more FPS. This is basically just setting the max performance from your GPU out of the box. Now, what are we going to be using to overclock? We will be actually using 3D Mark. Now, 3D Mark is paid software. There is a free version on Guru 3D. Just type in 3D Mark and you can download it. It's about a 7 GB download, but I will highly recommend the paid version. You can get some cheap CD keys if you guys are interested for about $5-ish dollars. And this is how I recommend benchmarking it. There's also stuff like Superposition and Heaven. Those are very outdated, especially Unigine Heaven. Superposition isn't that bad, but I have had very I've had overclocks pass superposition multiple times and they'll crash in a game. We don't want you to crash, so we'll be using 3D Mark today. I have it open through Steam, so let me just get it open. And we are actually going to start with our memory clock. Now, the reason we want to run our memory clock first is just because this one takes a little bit more time to actually run. So if you are on a GDDR6X graphics card, something like a 3070 Ti, 3080 and up, you will notice this. The 3060 Ti also has G6X, 3070s do not, they have GDDR6. Also, while we're at it, so if you are on GDDR6, you want to have Samsung memory. You can see that right here where it says memory type. If you have Samsung, you'll be able to clock it very much higher than you have Micron or Hynix. For GDDR6X, Micron is the only manufacturer of it for right now, and there's no problems with it. So what we're going to start off by doing is we're going to go to benchmarks. Now, if you're on the free version, you actually have to run the whole demo. I'm not going to, so all I'm going to do is hit custom. If you have the paid version, you can do this as well. Uncheck include demo, uncheck CPU test. Now, what you'll want to do is just go to your memory clock and type in a number. So I'm going to start off at 500. Just hit check. So now it'll be overclocked by 500 megahertz. And then I'm just going to run the demo. Basically what this is doing is just we'll be testing it. Now this is just a score that we're going to get. Actually, you know what? Before we actually overclock the memory first, I'm just going to set a 0 offset just so we can get a baseline number. So this is just baseline. Now with River Tutor, you will also see my temperatures and stuff, which is very good to see, especially when you are stress testing. Now I'm going to let this run and then I will get back. All right, so we have finished our baseline score, 711. What I'd recommend doing is actually making a notepad document, just calling it like GPU overclocks scores. So stock, we have 7,111. This is just important to have just so that you can actually keep track, especially when memory. So here we have 7,111 for our basic score. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to overclock my memory to 500. Actually, you know what? Let's just do 1,000 real quick. So what this is 1,000 memory overclock. Now we're going to go back to benchmarks. Now the reason we're using TimeSpy Extreme is because this is 4K and DirectX 12. DirectX 12 is the latest DirectX version. It's what most games are in now, so that's what we want to be testing in. For some people, you might want to try Firestrike for DX11. If you're on actually a lower end GPU, I'd maybe try TimeSpy, not TimeSpy Extreme. On my GTX 1070, I remember actually I could run a higher offset with TimeSpy Extreme, but it would crash in TimeSpy. That's just because it's a lower end graphics card, so it was actually being limited a lot more. But so just think about that if you're on a lower graphics card. But I just recommend using TimeSpy Extreme for most high end graphics cards. So we got this. We have 1,000. Now let's just see what happens whenever we run the system. So let's just give it some time to actually load the benchmark, and then we will see what happens. All right, here it is. I'm gonna let it run. Now, if you're on a GDDR6X, it has something called error correction. So what that means is that it will actually be able to run these high memory clocks that might be unstable, but what will actually happen is it will crash. It won't crash. It'll just get a significantly lower score, which could be a problem. Now, on other graphics cards, if it's too high, you'll actually see like artifacts, which like green or purple, just random things that will will not be actually there. Now, this is actually looking like it might run. When overclocking your VRAM, I'd highly recommend starting at about the 500 range and just increasing by 100 megahertz until you get to the point where you're getting a lower score or the exact same score. That's when you know that your VRAM is actually unstable, and you should just go back to the 100 megahertz. You can basically stop there. If you want, you can do it by about 50. Obviously, the lower granulation, like the lower you increase it by, the bigger deal it is. Now, as you can see, that might actually be an error. I don't know. It only showed up on the capture card. Graphics Test 2 actually tests VRAM significantly harder. So if you want to save time, just run Graphics Test 2. It is very VRAM intensive. Graphics Test 1 is more core, but everything's looking fine as of now. No crashing so far, which is really good. And so let's just take some time to see how it actually performs. Now this test finished. Look, 7,427. That is actually a very high overclock. So let's type in plus 1,000 VRAM, 7,427. So about a 300 point increase, which is very good. So now that means that, hey, let's just do 1,100 on the VRAM. So that we've done that. The reason I like to do VRAM first, just because core is very simple. Just increase it until it crashes. This, you kind of have to mess around with it. So I like to do VRAM first. And then also actually sometimes even higher VRAM can actually lower your memory clock speeds. But memory is actually very important. The same thing with having fast RAM in your PC. RAM is very important, especially in games today. All right, so now we have actually gotten to 1,100, and look, lower graphics score. So it looks like plus 1,000 is actually going to be the best for me. So plus 1,000 is what I'll be using, because look, if I just go, I'm going to type this in just so that plus 1,100 VRAM, 7,408. Now that's actually not that big of a difference, but still it is a drop. So we don't actually want to use that. Now we want to go to 1,000. Now one thing you could do actually is, if you have the full version, go to stress test, go to times by extreme. This will run 20 loops of graphics test 1 and graphics test 2. It'll take about 20 minutes, but this is very much worth it. I already know this will be stable. So now we're going to go to our core clock. So what you'll want to do is you'll actually want to hit Control F on your keyboard, and you'll get this voltage curve editor window. Can I make this bigger? Yes, I can. So what you'll want to do actually, so if you're on a Pascal Touring 10 series, 20 series, 16 series, your max voltage will be 1.093. If you're on an Ampere, so 30 series, you'll actually be at 1,100. Older GPUs, I do not know. They kind of depend. Look it up if you're on a 9 series GPU. If you're on a XOC BIOS, sometimes you can go higher. So like 20 series 1.125, and 10 series you're at 1.2. This does increase heat a lot, but I'm just going to recommend, obviously, you just go to the 1.093. If you don't want to, this will increase the power of your card. Honestly, about 1 volt is all you really need, but I'm going to make sure, but if you want the max FPS like me, 1.093 volts, and all you'll do is this. So you'll just increase that slider up. So we're just going to start at 100, just because that's just a good baseline, starting at about 100. Now if I hit check, 2040 megahertz. Now to do this, you'll just run the stress test for 20 loops, and then you will get a score at the end. It'll be like percentage fit passed. You want to get over 97%. They will not always be the same every loop, just because as the graphics card actually does heat up, it will get hotter, and it will be harder for it to keep those same core clocks. The hotter your GPU, the lower your clocks are. For example, about every 5 to 10 degrees Celsius, that is a 12 megahertz reduction. This is why repasting and getting a custom water cooling loop is actually very highly suggested for high-end graphics cards. It does cool down your graphics card a lot. You are able to go higher. For example, as you see, it's set to 2040, and because we're at 57C on the graphics card, we're at 2010 already. So we lost 30 megahertz there. Just remember, the cooler you can keep your card, the better. That's the most important rule. If you're on a 30 series also, I'd really recommend buying new thermal pads, just because that can actually cool it down. I'll leave a link down below to KPX thermal paste on Amazon. That is the best thermal paste. It's also not that insanely expensive. It does spread really well. It's very easy to use, and it will cool down your graphics card. That's what I have on this 2080 Ti right here. So I have canceled the test just because I don't want to run through 20 loops. But what you'll want to do is just want to increase it until you know it is stable. So for me on this graphics card at 1.093 on this BIOS, I can go to 2100 fully stable, and then I can run 1000 on the memory. This is my max overclock. Now what you'll want to do once you have actually finished this, you spent your time, you're going to want to take this right here, right click it, just save it to profile 1 or whatever profile you want. Hit this, hit check, and then also hit the Windows icon. If you do ever crash, typically you can hit Alt F4, Control Delete, just one of those, and you'll be able to close out the application and get back in. If not, just hit the reset button or hold the power button on your PC. This will not save automatically. You can just go right back in and save your overclock. Just one thing, make sure you don't like max out the sliders all the way. That's just a bad idea, and that could actually mean you have to DD your driver just so you can uninstall MSI Afterburner and reset your profile. So I would not recommend doing that at all. One thing though, just if this does crash in your game, just lower one of the core just set one of the core clock overclocks to 0. So let's say I'm crashing in, I don't know, what's like let's say I crash in Warzone, maybe just hit core clock, just type in 0. If it's still crashing, that means that your VRAM's crashing. So just set that to like subtract it by 100. If it's not crashing, then that means it's your core clock. Lower it by about 15 to 12 megahertz. That's how much this goes by. So for example, 2100 is plus 160. Actually, it's 2085. So if I go down 12 megahertz, I believe that is where it goes. So yep, right here. If I hit L, hit apply. Yes. Oh, it's 15 megahertz. Sorry. So this one's 15 megahertz. So it goes in 15 megahertz steps. So that's why I recommend start at. So once you go to, actually you want to be at 105. So start at 105, then go up 15 megahertz. Oh, that doesn't work. Let's say 105 doesn't work. Go down to 90, then 75, then yes, 75. That's how you want to do it. You want to overclock in 15 megahertz steps. Once you've done that, you've all done. Just save the profile, and you don't have to worry about it anymore. If you guys did enjoy the video, hit that like button, subscribe. Let me know if you guys want me to do an AMD GPU guide if you have one of those. Let me know what other guides you want to see, just so that we can max out your gaming FPS. If you guys are interested in me actually overclocking the rest of your system, your CPU and your RAM and your Windows and all that stuff, I do offer a service. Just join the Discord and message me on Twitter, something like that, and we'll see what we can do. Max out your FPS. Yes, see you guys.